Okay. Let us now get started in our next section titled Establishing a Federal Budget. And I want to start by saying this section is going to be more of a setup section. It'll be much shorter. And we're then going to get really, really in the weeds about federal government income. Where does our federal government get the money to do all the stuff that it does? Federal government spending, and then implications of federal government borrowing, and potential solutions too. We're then going to do state and local government spending, state and local government income, and implications of all that. So really important stuff here. And I hope that we use this as a setup, just to kind of understand the basics, okay? And well, basic number one, now focusing on the federal government, talking about DC, talking about our national government, is that Congress holds the power of the purse, okay? Congress is the group of people who get to decide where the money or how much money is spent, and largely have a huge decision-making power on where the money is spent. They also are the people who come up with the tax code. Now, I know it kind of goes against the way we talk, right? We just talked about Reagan's tax cuts, or Clinton's tax increases, or Bush's tax cut, or Obama's tax increase. But in reality, those are decisions of Congress. Now, the president, but going back to Harry Truman, right? The buck stops here. Roosevelt? Maybe it was Roosevelt. President is oftentimes the one who gets the credit or the blame when things don't work out well. And let's face it, the president has to sign off on every bill that Congress passes. They put their name on it. They're taking a certain level of responsibility for it. But I just think it's important when we understand this. We talk about the fact that Congress makes the budget. Right now, we have President Biden. Right? He's not drawing up potential government expenditures or tax cuts, or what percentage of our money goes here, or how much more should we increase taxes. That being said, he has given speeches over the last few months as to how he would like to raise corporate taxes or capital gains taxes on investors, or he hasn't quite come out with a tax increase on the top 1%, although I think he's hinted at it. So he or she eventually get to influence the decisions. And when you have a president like President Biden and former President Trump and former President Obama, at the beginning of their term, you have the House of Representatives and the Senate, both of their political party, then they can be very influential when it comes to things like budget matters, like drawing up how much we're going to raise taxes or cut taxes, or raise spending here and cut spending there. That's true. So these are two hands that need to work together to get this done. Now, so this is a congressional action. Congress passes an appropriations bill. Now, this is supposed to happen by October 1st every year. It doesn't always happen that way, especially when you have Congress who's of a different party than the president, or a Congress that is divided, where maybe the Republicans control the House and the Democrats control the Senate, or vice versa. These appropriation bills don't always come out on time. Okay, but in theory, they're supposed to be done October 1st and last a year to the following September 30th. Now, when you have a Republican Congress and a Democratic president, like under Obama, sometimes they don't do these yearly budgets at all. They just kind of kick the can down the road. They push it back a month. They do what's called a continuing resolution, where it says, no, we're just going to kind of keep things the same for a month. And then we'll fight about it again in a month. We'll keep things the same for a month. And then we'll fight about it again for the month. And oftentimes the Congress is trying to get the president to give in on something, or vice versa. The president's trying to say, I'm not going to sign it unless you include this or that. So that's kind of something we need to look at. Now, let's take a look at my slide, because what happens sometimes is, the president just straight out refuses to sign the budget. So they'll say like, oh, well, I disagree with your budget, Congress, and I'm not going to even sign the continuing resolution. I'm not going to sign anything. I'm shutting government down. That happens. As a matter of fact, it's happened a bunch of times. Let's take a look here. So let me just say Congress is responsible for establishing budget, but the president must sign it. So they have to work together. They can't make a deal. Sometimes they do a continuing resolution, which passes a month down the road, 2 months down the road, and keeps the budget the same levels they were. And if they can't agree on a continuing budget resolution, sometimes they'll shut it down. This almost never happens when they're when the same political party controls both the House, the Senate, and the presidency, like we have now under President Biden. But it could happen. Taking a look here, some of these numbers, I'm going to pull this up big. There have been President George Bush I shut down government once for 5 days. Gerald Ford shut down government for 12 days. Barack Obama shut down government once for 17 days. Ronald Reagan shut down the government 18 times, but only for 28 days. So it was an average of 3.5 days per. Bill Clinton shut down government twice for 28 days. Donald Trump, in his 4 years, shut down government 3 times for 39 days. And Jimmy Carter shut down government 6 times for 67 days. Folks, it is not popular when a president shuts down the government. And one reason is because it costs jobs. I mean, shutting down the government means more than just some kind of statement. It actually means that, different departments within our federal government stop working and don't get paid and don't do anything. I remember the last time that the budget was shut down was by President Trump. And some things don't stop, right? Like the military is not going to stop working. Sorry, we always work, right? But the Park Services got shut down. And what was President Trump? It was like almost 40 days. The parks are still there, but there's no one there cleaning up the bathrooms. Okay, there's no one there. Being a lifeguard at the beach, there's no one there. Being a park ranger, is these kind of things. And then it's a lot of the kind of inside baseball stuff. Like I have a friend who lives in Florida, and she's like, oh, I haven't worked. And like, what do you do? Oh, well, I work for the Department of Energy, and we actually, I do paperwork in a government office. I'm like, okay, well, what does that really mean to me, right? But the parks was the one where it was like, oh, wow. So you can't go to the beach? Really? Or if you do, the bathrooms are closed, and like It's just weird. It's different. This is the little kind of things, right? And these are federal parks, federal beaches versus not state beaches, because the state government runs that, right? It would be the federal stuff, the national park system or beaches. So if there was a shutdown, the housing and urban development, 96% of their workforce goes home, right? This is stuff to help low-income housing, education. A huge chunk of the Department of Education goes home. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, all gets shut down. So now we're polluting out of control. No one's going to check your pollution, right? Commerce, the Department of Commerce, the business, labor, treasury. And then down here, you see the Veterans Affairs. They don't go home. They're like, sorry, we're going to take care of the veterans no matter what. DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. Yeah, we're not going to like stop guarding the border or whatever because you shut the government down. The Department of Justice, they did actually have a backlog of cases during that period, but not completely, only 17%. So you get the picture, right? With the other agencies. And sometimes there's a thing, it's called a budget ceiling also. So on top of this concept of a yearly budget, or debt ceiling, I'm sorry, they can say, okay, well, you can't borrow any more than up to this number, bam. Right now, I think we're at 28 trillion, which is like mind-blowing, but theoretically, the debt ceiling, I don't know what it is today, it could be 30 trillion. And if we start approaching 30 trillion, when Obama was president, we would be approaching the debt ceiling, and Obama would be like, pass, the thing to raise the debt ceiling. And Congress would be like, no, we're not going to unless you do this for us. So it's a bargaining chip, oftentimes. The continuing budget resolution, the debt ceiling, if you have different political parties in there, right? But if it's the same political party, there's very, very rarely any fighting. I think President Trump was arguing at one point, one of the times he shut down the government, was about the wall. He wanted more money for the wall, I think. And let me just check. Okay, so yeah. So the weird thing about this one was that President Trump had a Republican House of Representatives and Republican that had passed the appropriations bill. He had agreed on it. He said, yeah, I agree on it. We're cool. He had worked with the Republicans. He's a Republican. And then all of a sudden, he changed his mind and he shut down the government against his own party until they gave him more money for his wall, the border wall between the U.S. and Mexico that President Trump really had promised to build. And you guys remember, that was one of his big things, was he was going to build a wall between Mexico and the U.S. Most of the time it's between opposing political parties, and it's used as a bargaining chip. It's very rare that shutdowns happen like that. So anyways, big picture, right? Congress does the budget, but the president is influential. He also has to sign it, or she has to sign it. So not only can they help shape it if their party's in power, but then they also have to agree, and it usually ends up being tagged onto their legacy, right? So although maybe I'm not saying for sure, this isn't guaranteed, maybe a Republican Congress passed, Clinton's tax bill. The Republican Congress doesn't get the credit as much, or the negative impact of it. It's more like usually what happens under a president, whether or not Congress does it or what party does it, is attached to his or her legacy. It's a part of their